One person split in two rather than...
Let's talk about this film then.
Yeah, okay.
Where did the idea come from?
I come from the village, so I've been there for holidays, and one time we went with Aran and we were in the local cafe where we originally started shooting, and it was the relationships between people, the characters that we noticed, just the situations, and it's a remote place, so they're like a small family. The people that go in the cafe meal. There was the central character was an old woman that runs it, and the 2-3 characters that come there. And I think we just decided that it's a good place a rich place to film. And
it wasn't really a clear idea on a film. It was just like a location that could work filming, and it took time just through filming really to come up with an idea that would work. So we always kind of think there was no particular idea, but it built up from what we filmed and what we were finding.
Eventually the cafe closed, shut down, so we had to change location. We just took two of the characters, so the father and the son, that are shepherds, and then we moved in their house, so we kind of started filming their house, and we thought it was interesting relationships and it's quite refined spaces, and then we thought, okay, shepherds, like the whole like family structure, let's find some others. So we kind of roamed around the village, which is quite small and not many people live there anymore. So we kind of ran out from the locals in the and then we spread out a little bit in the surrounding villages. So it's made out of that one village is actually like other villages too, close by, because there just wasn't enough people. And then we bumped into Bahmus, the white-haired shepherd, one day with his wife, and we started shooting immediately, like that day, and it just felt so comfortable. They were really, really easy, and we filmed in their house, and it just worked out. So we kept with these two families.
So did you know that it was going to eventually be, I guess you could say, a fiction film? I mean, it does blur the lines between fiction and non-fiction. Did you have any idea of how to structure it into a story, or were you deliberately blurring that line?
I think the first thing that we decided was that they weren't going to be looking at the camera, so that gives it a kind of definition in some way. But I don't think the actual structure we were planning so much to be. In some ways, we had no idea what we were doing, really. We were just kind of finding our feet as we went to film. So I think we started editing because of the way we shot it. We shot some, came back, edited, shot some again. So we repeated that. And then we were just editing it in this way that kind of began to look like something else, more than documentary. And then as we went back, we could kind of guide the film more in that way. So,
like we created a puzzle in a way. Like, so we were piecing together things that we had, and we're looking out for shots that we didn't have and scenes that could work. And then we decided on the structure, the daily structure. So it's kind of a very because their days are quite repetitive. So we thought, what if it feels like that as well? So the normal life day, like day structure basically. And then that created more of an easy way to work. We knew what we needed, but then it was quite hard to get it. So you had to be patient a lot and follow them around and really live their life and make sure that you're there at the right time, at the right place, and and suited the way in the style that we had from before. So it was tough because a lot of times you would expect things to happen, and actually life is really unexpected. So even if their lives are quite repetitive, like you're still not sure if what will happen. So some of the scenes that we did, the goat selling, eventually in reality they did sell the goat, but we structured it so they didn't, and there was a misunderstanding. So there's like fictional stories within there.
When you're picking this place, this specific location, it seems like there's a little bit of the old there up against the progress of the new. This is a kind of timeless tension, but a lot of people are obviously seeing it as a kind of metaphor for a situation now. Was that something that you intended, or was it just a byproduct of the films that surround it in Greece right now?
I think it's partly intentional, partly something that came about, and the relevance kind of was given to it by external factors. But I think in Greece, that kind of tension between the past and the future is very prevalent in many sections of society and all around. So, but our idea really was to capture this kind of archaic way of life, but somehow through that it became some kind of vision of the future as well by doing that, and it's kind of seeing where this thing's come from. But I think we were quite conscious we wanted to make a film that looked like it could have been done 10 years ago or 20 years ago. There's very few things in it that have changed apart from, say, mobile phones or something, but yeah, it was kind of...
I think unconsciously we picked our subject matter, and I guess it's what you're interested in. We kind of like that part of life, the older, more rustic, and it was that misplacement. Like, how do these people that have hardly left the village, how are they placed in this world that is, it's a kind of sensitive matter, and also the fact that it wasn't really done in Greece. I was surprised. So you can't really find films. People don't really make such films. They're not really interested.
I think a lot of Greek films kind of want to look at the future or where they've got to now in this very modern. So I think, yeah, it's quite uncommon. That's the kind of feeling that you get especially in Greece, of people like, wow, we haven't seen films like this about this kind of stuff. Even though it sounds like a very
common subject.
Like if you say we made a film about shepherds in Greece in the mountains, people kind of go, oh yeah, I've seen one of those, I'm sure. Like, but then you realise there aren't really many. We found some old 60s ones, but they were, they're kind of like comedy films, kind of play acting stuff.
Well, the 60s in Greece cinema, and 50s a bit, I guess, were kind of influenced by Italian neorealism. I mean, did you have any markers in Greek history, film history, that you were in communication with your film? It kind of stands out from the ones that are made now. So I'm wondering if there's something in the past, like in Angelopoulos or something like that.
I mean, halfway through making it, they finally released all these. I think it was just before he died, or just after they died.
Artificial Eye did
Artificial Eye in the UK did it, all his box sets, so we could see his. We hadn't really seen them, and his first film was shot in a village, slightly further north in Greece, and it was really interesting to see it because there was so many similarities between.
I mean, it was
not
a scripted
the film so much,
story, but it was shot in a village, and he had both the actors and all the set and everything that he had structured, but then there was a lot of it was part documentary, because back then it was his first film, and it was a really good blend of both, and we were seeing the people live in the villages back then. Like when they were going off to Germany, but then they were populated villages, they were busy places, and but they were going through their own crisis at the time, so it was the surge out of the country, And now what we were filming was kind of the people, the empty villages.
Yeah.
And it was quite shocking to see it. And I saw it and I was like, God, there's not that many differences in the places and the people. And
this was shot in 1970. But actually the way things look, the cafes, the people actually didn't look that different in nearly 45 years.
But saying so, like, I mean, we don't script anything, we don't have actors, we don't, in the style and the things that we like to look at, I guess we resemble more in the locals than any other directors. I mean, there are not that many in Greece, but I would say we're closer to
With certain things not changing in the location, I noticed in the film that when the radio's on, when the TV's on, it's kind of otherworldly, it's kind of outside of it, it's not really kind of breaking through. Is that a manipulation that you're doing for the story, or is that actually the lived environment where there's just not really, there's not that same network of connections?
Well, I think, no, again, it's this kind of intentional, but the reality as well. I mean, they only really receive one TV channel there, so it's always moving up and down and kind of coming on and off.
And it's their perception of the
I think, when you see them watching the things that go on in Athens, to them it's so far away. Or like if they see, I don't know, celebrity news or something, it's just such a abstract thing to them, but they kind of watch it anyway. And or they watch like those Turkish soaps and stuff, but it's kind of
this remote like perception of the world. It's quite
it's a
like
very strange.
It's weird for us to see it. You know,
Yeah.
most of the times, like, because you start observing them and how is their life, and something you don't often do. When you go on holiday, you will see like only a glimpse of it, and you sort of make assumptions. But when you are there, constantly living their life, it's quite different to what we're used to. So I think it was like very observational piece what we created, and very subjectively brought out. And kind of stylized.
On that similar point, the film begins and ends with off-screen sound. And I was wondering what that device meant for you as filmmakers. Is it a kind of motif of distance or something like that?
I think that sound is kind of in keeping with it's a kind of abstract reality in the film that's created, so it's never meant to be clear that this, and I think that goes throughout the way that we shot the film as well. You know? There was someone yesterday in the Q&A saying, why didn't you just pan up when things moved, or why didn't you just go left or right when they left the screen?
Broken,
it was kind of like, okay, that's one way of looking at it, but it was quite a considered move, this kind of static camera, always just observing whatever was in front of it rather than trying to chase the action. So
and really try and disappear, so you don't sense that someone is there sort of looking at them.
Yeah.
But you feel like you're sort of a ghost in there. You just happen to see a glimpse of someone's life.
You don't even open with the glimpse, you just have the black screen, which is an interesting way to begin a film, to have that much audio before the visual comes in. What went into that decision?
There was something just about the words he was using, and it kind of
Chaos.
seemed to, it just kind of seemed to hit home more with the black screen, somehow just hearing it and seeing it.
It's like an editing trick almost.
Yeah.
It's more effective. We were playing around in the editing, and we were like, this is...
But I think because I don't speak Greek, so everything was subtitles, so I see it much more through the subtitles, almost like those subtitles on the black screen are like the image, you know, that maybe if you were speaking Greek, it's much more like you wouldn't have them, it would be a black screen. Anyway, I don't know.
Also, it was one of the shots that it was impossible to bring ourselves, not impossible, but it was to bring ourselves out of the environment that we were not actually there. And we didn't want to have this direct kind of semi-interview. So we did want to create it a bit like abstract, make that piece a bit abstract of him speaking to himself maybe, or like to who, you don't know, he's just saying it out loud. because when we had it continuous, it really felt like we were just filming him and having that kind of going on about the subject. But we wanted to create make it more abstract, basically, and have it as a little intro to something else that in our mind it sticks out as it doesn't really fit to the rest of the film. It's not like
so it's kind of
it's on its own sort of thing. It's like a note.
And speaking of which, when you are filming people, I mean, they're not looking in the camera, but the camera not moving in the natural light kind of creates a portraiture or something. I was wondering what those compositions, how you arrived at that decision of how you were going to shoot all the individuals.
Sometimes things just felt like it wasn't a decision or a choice. They were.
It just
is consistent.
Yeah, I guess so. But it was kind of the geography of the room. I mean, they were like, so small, and they all have their seats. Like they don't really move. So you kind of have someone who always sits in the same place. So you kind of end up having many of the same shots of them. So you're going back day after day and kind of just seeing the same shots again, and so it's.
And you can't really ask them to do things, so you really have to create something.
You sit in your seat and you change to in front of the fire. They kind of have their seats. So I think somehow you end up looking into that kind of static mode that they're just sitting in their seats. So you kind of have to investigate that rather than action or people moving and doing things. And
by far, for example, one of the characters, the wife, Kiki, she's so animated that she was the most difficult to shoot because she just doesn't stop moving. So we kind of knew her character. We had recognized that, and also Yorgos was quite like animated, and so you take the other ones as reference and you start like imagining how it's going to work in the edit, and when you shoot, you're aware of that. It's a long process. I mean, we realized that it's our first feature film, and you recognize the difficulties that this style of working has. It's very unexpected, and you have to be very aware when you're actually shooting, and you have to really observe and really like take in.
It's not the easiest way to make a film.
I know it has its challenges, but there's a lot of beauty in in that way of working because you get a lot of unexpected shots
But it kind of comes back to the idea of just not having the idea in the first place. So you're not trying to kind of achieve something. You're just keeping going with something and hoping there's some kind of connection with what you're doing, that you can piece it together, but it's...
And I think that's the difference when people will do the pan. That limitation that you can't do that, so you go away from the documentary style, you really are very fixated, so your choices are not many, and you have to be really aware of that when actually shooting. And of course you need to shoot more, so you're aware of time, and then production-wise, the cameras and blah 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 goes on and on. But I think eventually, like I guess with the next one, we'll figure out some parts of how to do it best. But you always have chance.
And I mean, like indoors, you're limited, but you have a striking shot that comes up twice of I guess the shepherd, you could say, the image of the shepherd. I mean, like that you're repeating at the beginning and at the end. Like, was that maybe more of a stage shot, or?
Oh yeah. Okay, that was clearly like the beginning and the end of sort of. It was dusk and dawn.
Yeah.
And it was something like kind of comes back, this repetition, so it's like...
That was one of the few kind of very staged shots that we said to him, okay, we're going to do this, and we explained it to him, and so and the ending of the film, and so he said okay, and so some things like that are kind of...
But you always, I mean, that was also the idea of like their life being very repetitive. So you see the first shot and the last shot, and you think, well, at least like vaguely we wanted to put that in, that it's sort of, this week is it going to happen again? You know, how lives just kind of, was he there? Is he there every day? You know, was the first and the last day connected somehow? So you just lose track of. There's the day structure, but it's very repetitive, but very loose. Like I think the ideas that we put in through, they're very easy for people to interpret in different ways. So, you know, people notice different things and the little details, and they're not quite like very straightforward.
It was kind of trying to choose these really small moments in their life that could build up to something more with more impact, but the actual scenes are quite small things, you know, like talking about the price of cigarettes or the aerial of the TV breaking and things, kind of, but somehow there's a kind of,
you just place them
something building up that is kind of menacing almost, and it's kind of small everyday bits of information.
Does a lot of that have to do with, I mean, you were shooting during like a stormy period? Like, was that a deliberate choice to, like, knowing your environment, that it would kind of have this gray quality, this gray palette to it?
I think we started off consciously wanting to avoid the sunny, kind of beautified version of Greece, but then when we first filmed, they had like the rainiest period for many years, and I mean, I had never seen such rain, and it got us, like, we saw the place like that, we couldn't take that image off, it just looked so much better. and then
but it kind
adding
of
to
gave
the struggle.
It was something, I mean, it was partly to do with that long shot of the goats at the beginning, which was one of the first shots, first few days we were filming, and it kind of, we felt like that had to be the aesthetic of the film. Once we'd done that, it was I don't know, it was hard to see the place differently after that. So, but actually every time we went filming, we'd always have this kind of weather, and so actually it was just something that, if that weather hadn't happened, we would have, I guess, figured out another way of looking at it, but it just kept happening, so we kind of felt like it was on our side. It was also somehow.
Because it was meant to be 4 days, so you think like you can't have like one rain day, one sunny day, it had to be a balanced, you know, so the weather was like a very important way of structuring the layout of the film. Like choosing the right shots, because we
agonized over how much rainfall was in this shot and this one.
It's probably
no one noticed it until we were like, this one's got a good balance of how low the grey cloud is in this one. So
yeah, we're quite particular about it. Maybe too obsessive, but it helped us to structure the whole film in the end, and I hope it worked. I think it worked.
Some of the menace that also comes across through the structure of the film is that the penultimate scene is about, there's a conversation about children leaving, and maybe this idea of community and what it means. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the community of the people in that space, and, you know, is it a kind of problem where the younger generations leave, they don't stay to maintain the community?
Yeah, I mean,
they've left already.
They've left. There's no school there. There's no kids.
Really. I mean, it's shrinking to a very fast pace, and even though Greeks have this idea that they can go back to the villages, practically doing it is really hard because there's nothing there. They've evacuated the place and left it, abandoned it. So it's quite hard to return, and you see all these aged people pretty much seeing no hope around, and they don't understand even us being there. They wouldn't understand, why are we interested in this place? Like, there's nothing here. So they kind of feel like they're the last ones, and it goes to it starts from the shepherds, the old school shepherds, that lived a more archaic, like very shepherdy life. You know, the more original, not the modernized way of shepherding. They're in demise. I mean, they're not that many.
There's not that many. I mean, they're almost hard to find. which probably 10, 20 years ago would have been
much easier. I
much
mean, I remember
easier to find these.
I'd go on holidays there in the summer and winter, and it's like a really fast decline. And even for us, like just filming over the course of 2 years, and the crisis hitting, we saw the change. Because when we first started, there was the crisis hadn't really like become part of their life. It was this thing that was coming, like, you know, hurricanes coming, or but eventually we saw it actually like they were living it, and it became part of the film. And originally we didn't, and still, I mean, our intentions were not to focus on the financial issues of Greece. It was more of the humans and human relationships. But it was hard to avoid it. But yeah, the villages are.
But it's quite
pretty much
striking how, if you drive through them, they're empty. There's no kids, so you don't feel like anyone is going to be replacing them or interested in that way of life at all. So yeah, I felt
It's
like
quite,
that was the motivation for the film. Really, was the feeling that if we don't make it now, then maybe there won't be any kind of thing to make a film about in a few years.
How have the audiences reacted to that? I mean, you're programmed here with a bunch of other films from Athens, but it's obviously not really Athens, right? Like it's city, but it's not city. So, I mean, how's the reception been in this kind of period where a lot of Greek cinema is getting attention?
Yeah, I think our film has been kind of a welcome addition to that, because it's slightly a different tone, a slightly a different way of looking at Greece, and I think it's kind of refreshing that I'm not saying not all the Greek films are the same, but there's a similar kind of tone.
I mean, we talked about it in the press conference, and we've talked about it with the other directors. They work in a very communal way, because I mean, there are not that many of them in like the cinematographers, the writers, the script writers, and so on and so forth. So they end up kind of working together. And you can see the similarities at times in the film, even some bit more distant than others. But we came out from a different, completely, we didn't know any of them until recent. I mean, here I met most of them. We obviously came from London and kind of went to the village, never met them. And then when we got in Berlin, I got to meet Alina.
But we kind of made the film in a cave.
Yeah, it also it was just
not
us
literally,
two.
but we just
played escape.
Yeah, we were just kind of stuck away for almost 2 years making this film. We didn't really speak to anyone about it or anything. So then when it was shown in Berlin, we were kind of like, it's like some people who've been living tucked away for years coming out. And
because,
so
I mean, if we had met them, maybe someone would be like, oh, do you want to help with this, help with that? Suddenly you bring in another factor. And we didn't have that. So, yeah, it was quite a two-man band.
Yeah.
Is there more of a kinship with contemporary, I want to say European filmmaking, that is like a Pedro Costa or something like that, where nonfiction and fiction are being blurred and you're specifically spending time with a community and integrating yourself? Is that more of the...
I think the non-actors is like a new kind of surge into cinema. People do that more. I mean, when we were in...
But I think it's very Iranian as well, like kind of always just using the person that is what they want to film, rather than trying to find an actor to fill this role.
I don't think actors would be happy about this happening, but yeah. I mean, it works so much better.
But I mean, for a shepherd film, the idea of like having an actor play a shepherd would just be ridiculous. It would be, you know, it would be laughed at. So
you can't imitate. This is something.
Have you considered what the next project is? I mean, you were mentioning that you were considering a different approach to whatever it is, but do you actually have something in mind?
We are kind of speaking about it and kind of slowly coming up with something, but I think the different approach would be I think working with one central actor, but a non-actor, but someone that we're directing more, and being able to kind of go through documentary situations, so the similar things, cafes and bars and situations with other people that would be completely unscripted. So we kind of have maybe 20% control over what happens, but whereas here sometimes we had no control over what was happening.
I mean, we want to have one central character, and the subject is going to be Faith, and he's going to be traveling somewhere for a reason, challenging that faith, his faith, someone else's faith. But it's an idea, and we know that it probably will end up into something else. We're quite loose, and we're not. We're even though we plan things, it's a sort of like in a very subtle,
it kind of feels
intuitive
like
way. I think
we can plan the first 10 minutes of a film.
Yeah.
Just see
think
what,
about the beginning, think about the end, and something will happen in the middle.
and the end will probably change, and the beginning will probably be cut out. And
I think as long
something
as your
new.
idea is there, then because you can't really play with life and be so stiff, because eventually we'll just make a scripted film.
You just think this person's not working. Why don't we just get an actor to come and do the lines properly, and then you're getting.
It never works as well when you.
I think
it
when you
looks
try and
stiff
push
when you make
people,
people do stuff, and you can notice it in films. I mean, we've watched films that are kind of this docu-fiction, and you can see when things have been intentionally placed there, which is something we tried to do. It didn't work, and straight away just put it aside. So yeah, it's like taking those risks of letting it roll, basically.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.